so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness which creates and animates all things. After years of exploring this awe-inspiring truth on this podcast, I'm super excited to announce that we are now going even deeper down the rabbit hole on the new late-night style consciousness-elevating talk show called Optimistic, which features none other than you, the listeners. Optimistic is taped out of the epic, spaceship-esque 8-bedroom property we call the Mystic Manor that myself and the rest of the Optimistic crew now navigate reality from in Venice Beach, California. And you are invited to come experience a Mystic Manor immersion week with us. During your week-long stay, you'll enjoy unique workshops, chef-prepared meals, one-on-one time coaching and consulting with me, and even co-creating magic with me as a guest on both Optimistic and an episode of the Positive Head podcast. When I started this, my aim with these immersive retreats was to facilitate the ultimate spiritual upgrade and tune-up, so to speak, for our guests while providing them with one of the most memorable experiences of their lives. And I'm happy to say that as of this recording, every guest at the end of their trip so far has told me that they have had a profound and transformational experience at the Mystic Manor and that they definitely want to come back. All that being said, we only have a limited number of spots available between now and next July. And as of this recording, about half of those spots are already filled. So if there's any part of you that is screaming, yes, I want to come, I feel like I need to be there, go now and book a slot with me to discuss how we can put our heads together and make it happen at calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. I know for some people there is also that little voice in their head saying, why not? I can't get off work. I can't afford it, and on and on and on. But, really Henry Ford, I think, said it best. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And I'm confident that where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm personally committed to doing everything in my power, including discounts and payment plans, to get you here if it is something that truly feels like a huge yes for you energetically and like you're meant to be here. Once again, the link to book time to discuss with me is calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. That's spelled calendly.com/talkwithbrandon. All one word, of course. And book in some time and look forward to seeing you soon here at the Mystic Manor. All right, all you positive heads, on this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Shane Mauss here with me on the show. Shane is a comedian that has appeared on Jimmy Kimmel, Conan O'Brien, Comedy Central. He's the host of the Here We Are podcast. Hopefully it's a funny one. Shane, welcome to the show, my friend. No pressure.
Oh, no pressure at all. Wow. Thanks for having me.
I had someone tell me that the other day. Who was it? Yesterday, someone I was saying, yeah, I'm doing a comedian, talking to this comedian Shane tomorrow and just telling him a little bit about, what I know of you. And they're like, and I'm like, yeah, I think it should be pretty funny, we'll see. And they're like, well, he's a comedian, it better be funny. And I'm like, yeah, let me put a lot of pressure on right at the top of the show. Like, this better be hilarious. We better be like cracking up the whole time or else.
Wow. I'm about ready to hang up right now.
Pull out the routine, dude.
Yeah. It's actually like one of my favorite things about I think a lot of stand-ups are this way, that we're not like always on or whatever.
Right.
But much of much of stand-up is the writing process and sitting and kind of trial and error, tweaking things and getting things down just right. So like, you see someone's stand-up special or something like that, and every joke has been done, like hundreds of times and tweaked in this way and that, and every single word and inflection and movement has purpose and moves it along, and that is not how real life works at all.
Not at all.
It's actually one of my favorite things about podcasting. So when I started my comedy career 15 years ago, early on, the traditional route was that you get you work really hard. You eventually you get into festivals and maybe get noticed, and then you get your best 5 minutes together and apply to, or hopefully a booker from one of the late night shows sees you at a festival or something like that, and then you have your best 5 minutes together, and it's just perfect. And it was like it was still almost the leftovers from like the Johnny Carson days, where you get on Johnny Carson, you have a great 5 minutes, and if he invites you over to the couch afterwards, you made it. And if he doesn't invite you over to the couch, well, you missed
Your
that
career
opportunity.
is over.
and it was still like a little like that when I started, and social media wasn't a thing. By the time I got on Conan within about 3 years, so I was like really fast tracked in this kind of traditional route,
Right?
and and I was able to do a bunch of TV sets early on, and able to go full time in clubs, and this wasn't that people knew me; it was just that I had enough credits to like put on a poster or like decent video clips to advertise on a website or whatever.
Right.
And that was around the time of like MySpace had started taking off, and like Dane Cook had gotten like really big on MySpace and was doing all these colleges and stuff. And then Facebook and Twitter came out, and then shortly after podcasts started coming out, and then it created this thing, because I remember I was working. I just started working internationally, and at that time it was still a big deal. Like, this American comic was on an American late night television show.
Oh my
wow.
goodness.
But all the comics over there, how they kind of made names for themselves is doing these fringe festivals and doing where they do like these solo shows and stuff it wasn't traditional stand-up. It was more like a one-person show where, there's meaning behind it, and you're like telling your life story in a funny way, but there's also tears, and like you end the show in this dramatic and that is why I can't eat barbecue anymore, and not a dry eye in the house, and we all laughed, and we're on this emotional roller coaster ride. And the same time I had started doing that was kind of the same time that podcasts had started bubbling up. So at the same time that I wanted to do more international things and have I need to have a themed show. My background life is kind of boring, and so what would my themed show be about? Not even psychedelics weren't on the radar for me to do like a whole show about psychedelics. Seemed like crazy to me. I was never a part of any like psychedelic community. I didn't go to festivals. I just did psychedelics like by myself, whenever I could get my hands on them. And so I had a natural curiosity in science at that time, and I had another podcast for a while with an ex of mine, and then when our relationship dissolved, that podcast ended, and I I had really gotten into reaching out to scientists and kind of trying to collaborate on projects and not really sure what to do. And that's when I came up with my podcast, Here We Are, where I interview a different scientist each week in my stand-up travels. And that was, by that time, that was like, so it went from, so when I started, most of radio had and this is what kind of started this conversation, most of radio had that expectation of like, okay, you got 5 minutes on the morning zoo.
Right.
And you like walk in and they're like, we got Shane Mauss in here, real wacky guy, honka honka. And there's like sound effects and stuff. And then you like walk in and they like ask you for questions to like lead you into things. So they're like, apropos of nothing, they're like, so I hear you like driving your car. Tell us about that. And then you tell your car joke. And it was just like this really forced, contrived. And then they're like, ha 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 ha. Like hopefully, if they're doing their job right, they're like forcing these like over the top laughs.
Right.
And it was just like so brutal. Meanwhile, you're doing it at like 6 a.m.
Right.
And like, who the hell is listening to radio at 6 a.m, hearing your 5-minute like nonsense and then coming to a show at 10 p.m. that night? Like, none of it made any sense. And so podcasts opened up the way for comedians and everyone else to start exploring their natural interests more and do things in a more genuine way. And so now when we get laughs, they're actually like genuine laughs, like authentic laughs, not this contrived, like,
right.
I have a bit about this. And it's really changed. It's changed everything. And people get to know us a lot better and know about us. You know, someone can watch a clip of mine on Conan or something and get some quick laughs, but they didn't learn a single thing about me. People have already learned more about me in the beginning of this podcast than they would learn in
the morning zoo,
in any in the morning zoo or any Conan set of mine. Which is like a real contrived thing too. Doing those things is such a like forced and contrived, inauthentic situation. And so that's part of the joy of podcasting, and you know, it comes along with its own troubles of figuring out how to build your own audience and and quality control situations and stuff like that, but it really opens up tons of doors to. I have a brother-in-law that listens to like 3 different board gaming podcasts.
Wow.
Because he's really into board games, and
that's a niche. That's a niche podcast.
That's what I'm saying. That's something that like did not exist even like 10 years ago. You know, I sound like an old man talking about the pre-podcast days, and this was just 10 years ago. And now look at us. We're going to have a conversation about synchronicities, psychedelics, and a bunch of weird ideas that they definitely don't want to hear about on the morning zoo.
Right. It's so true, man. It's like, and all the authentic like stuff that will arise is, you know, a natural laugh is like, you know what I thought of as soon as you were talking about this, I instantly started thinking about the movie The King of Comedy with Robert De Niro. Have you? I'm assuming you've seen King of Comedy. I just saw it for the first time within the last year. And, you know, it's such a great flick, and you know his whole like planned his whole life, the shtick when he, and if you guys out there haven't seen it, highly recommend it. It's such a good, like, I think it's from like early 80s. Such a good, you know, talk show host, very kind of twisted movie about I won't spoil it for you, but about a talk show host and a guy who wants to be a talk show host who's a little bit mentally unstable, and he gets his big chance in a very interesting way, and it's just like, and then he delivers his this planned out shtick that he's been planning for 20 years or whatever, and it's just incredible, and now here we are, like you said, having these authentic conversations. I mean, literally, I prepared for 5 minutes before this conversation. I used to, when I started out, I'm 1,000+ episodes in. Yeah, and it's like,
come on, man.
I would prepare, early on. I mean, I was never a huge preparer, and some people it's easier than others. And this one, it's like, okay, there's not like a bunch of sometimes people will send over a bunch of questions, like, here's what the topics of my new book's coming out. I want to talk about X, Y, Z. It's like, okay, cool. Explore psychedelics. Check. I'm done a lot of that myself. Okay, comedian. Okay, there's nothing more therapeutic than laughing. My favorite thing on earth to do. Check. Okay, does a podcast. Okay, cool. Let's dig in. Let's see what he does. Let's just get to know him and record it in the process. And that's literally what it is. So it's so authentic, and it allows these authentic interactions and experiences to arise in a way that I think is just so much better, more well received than the clown honk nose with your, the super canned questions, because I have no idea where this is going to go. The one thing, like I said to you at the top, like, tell us some stories. I love stories. Story of synchronicity, serendipity. That's about the extent of the preparation. So to me, that just feels really fun, because I don't know exactly where it's going to go.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love it. Same with my podcast. I mean, I prep a bit more for my podcast because I'm a professional.
Little.
But
yeah. The difference between you and me.
I'm kidding.
What's funny about that? What's funny about that? I was just about to go into my first canned question. I always start with a canned question and end with a canned question. So I'm like, and after that stint, let me go to my canned question. But
you have canned questions? I want to hear your canned question.
Just to completely throw people and discredit my spiel there.
We're very authentic. Now I'm going to authentically transition into my first canned cliche.
Yeah, and here it is. Ready? Since we set it up. You're in an elevator.
Drum roll, please.
We need a honky nose for you. So you're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
I have 10 floors to answer.
And if you go to 11, we're going to have a problem.
So how fast is this elevator?
It's kind of like the Willy Wonka elevator.
Okay.
Remember the Willy Wonka elevator?
So I feel like I have like a good 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, you're about. I'd say that's safe.
So in an elevator, I would usually say that I'm a stand-up comedian and science communicator, where I interview scientists on a podcast, and then also perform a live comedy, half science show. And that's because on an elevator with a stranger, I wouldn't bring up that I'm also kind of a psychedelic communicator and advocate, which is my third kind of hat that I wear. So those are my three things that I do, besides just the human thing. But yeah, that's what I would say. If we had more time, yeah,
we do. It's a Willy Wonka elevator, so it like blasts into space. If you recall,
yeah, I'd say much of my life is just getting people to question some of their perceptions and assumptions about life, and giving people insights into especially kind of the subconscious mind, and how the way in which we evolved shapes how we behave today.
Cool. That's a pretty cool passion. Actually, I have a fun little synchronicity of sorts. So it is. What is it now? As we're recording this, this is a Thursday morning. Last night, I actually partook in some psychedelic exploration which is pretty rare for me on a week. Oh, really? What was your what did you utilize? What was your tool?
I did some ketamine.
That's what I did with someone that had a story about. I'm like, okay, guys, I got to go to bed. That's my favorite. That's by far my favorite. And normally on a weeknight, I'm in bed at like 10 o'clock, but I have a bunch of visionary artists here at my house. I live in a place called the Mystic Manor, and we're shooting this new late night style talk show that's all consciousness related called Optimistic, spelled MYSTIC. Just released the trailer for it yesterday. Super excited. And I have a bunch of part of it. It features visionary artists and live visionary artist painting, and I'm like actually partaking because 3 of them are here doing a live piece on the side of the property. They're hanging out all week. I have built tents in the backyard, and when guy Jonathan, you got
to bring
Salter,
that painting to life.
Yeah, this guy Jonathan Salter comes in and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing some ketamine. You want to partake?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." Twist my arm, and then I'm sitting with him like, "Okay, I need to go to bed. I've got an early interview." This guy Shane Mauss, comedian. Oh, I have a good Shane Mauss story. I hung out with him, and we, he had this whole. I was on ketamine, so to give you the exact story, it was like, let's see, you guys, you had performed, I think, your stand-up science thing, and you had come back to hit a place with him, and I think you guys were partaking in some psychedelics that night too, and he'd had some glasses.
That was my first time. That was my first time doing recreational ketamine.
That's hilarious! What a great synchronicity.
I've been dabbling ever since.
Oh, dude, it's the one. It's the one that's
it's just so easy.
It's so easy. That's exactly what I always say. Like, I've always been the most non-addictive personality ever. Never smoked cigarettes. Not into alcohol. Like marijuana, quite a bit in my early 20s. Not much at all now. And that is one. It's like the psychedelic cocaine. It's so easy. There's no hangover. Obviously, people hear about like K-holes and going super deep. For me, it's just like, oh, give me some to give me that sense of psychedelia and give me that like, okay, I feel like I'm in a video game for, the next couple hours.
Super deep.
Did you?
Oh yeah. Yesterday I went my deepest yet. I like to find out where the edge is. And
I've definitely done that in the past with it. These days it's.
Yeah. I've never understood like what the K-hole meant.
Yeah, I think it's, what I think the K-hole is? I'm the same way. I think it's just, when someone has taken a lot and gone super deep, they're now having an inner journey, right? And if you see them externally, they look like they're laid out and not necessarily having a good time. It's like, well, what's the matter with him? Why is he passed out in the corner? It's like, well, meanwhile, he's having like this incredible inner exploration of, multi-dimensional sort of experience. But from the person who's, hanging out, at a party, it's probably not like the best party move to go into a K-hole, right? Whereas with me at this point in my dabbling with it and experience with it is like, I don't usually go super, super deep because I like to still be able to, like last night, we're hanging out. It's like, okay, I want to interact and talk and still have some mental faculty and awareness of, the space I'm in. But that's what's crazy about that substance is it's like, and of course they're using it now. All these, like, someone just told me here in LA, there's a clean up the road, sign from the local ketamine clinic. It's like, I have a friend who just went, his wife suffers from anxiety and depression, and she just went to a ketamine clinic in Laguna Beach down in Orange County. Like, they're popping up everywhere where like they're using this as like, I have another friend, his wife's a doctor. She uses it as a local anesthetic. I have another friend who had an asthma attack. Nothing could get him to stop. They gave him ketamine. It's like, this thing is like being used for like, they say it's the best thing you can give someone who's suicidal. And so it's just very interesting to see how it's like becoming this like, super substance.
You can just
and of course,
do some and bring a painting to life.
Exactly what happened last night. He's like, oh, I have a Shane Mauss story. And so it's hilarious that like, and then I'm like, okay, I didn't get as much sleep as normal.
Well, I'm glad that I missed the podcast yesterday because then we wouldn't have this synchronistic story.
You got it.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. So when you come through LA, you'll have to come by the Mystic Manor, and perhaps we can have our own little adventure, psychonautic adventure.
That sounds terrific.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you did a documentary, Psychonautics. I have not seen it. I like that. A cosmic comics exploration of psychedelics.
It's just a comics exploration of psychedelics.
No, I'm adding the cosmic though.
Oh, I see. Well, you're fucking up everyone's Google search. Psychedelics, a comics exploration of psychedelics. It was me trying to do. I was gonna try to do every psychedelic that there was.
Oh wow! Well, that's quite the menu, my friend. Because that seems to be an ever expanding menu
of like the hits, of the big ones,
right?
And we didn't get there. Ended up having some strange occurrences and some what would be called mental health issues. This isn't spoiling the documentary. It opens with me explaining that I just got out of a psych ward. And then it goes back to show the story.
So you
of what
went
happened.
too far with your exploration, probably, I would assume. I haven't seen it, but
yeah. And it wasn't even that I was trying to do all the psychedelics. It was that what it doesn't show is that I was just doing throughout the filming of the documentary. I decided that I would do mushrooms like 3 times a day, or not 3 times a day, 3 times a week.
Oh, okay.
3 times a day would be a bit much. But 3 times a week was maybe a bit much too. Whereas normally I'd maybe do mushrooms like 3 times a year or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's more my speed with some psychedelics like that. A couple times a year at this point. I feel like I've sort of, I think it was Terrence McKenna that said if you get the message, hang up the phone. And I do feel like that for the most part. I've done a fair amount of exploring, even with, like ketamine, talking about that. It's like, I feel like I've kind of gotten what I can from this. I still will dabble here and there, but yeah, I think it's one of those things you have to be careful with, because if you're sort of going, it's such a great medicine. You, like anything, it can also be taken too far. And if your exploration was to just like, I'm going to do it all, and like it's like eating the same food all day every day, or it's like they're so powerful. So I can't. Man, what a trip! Now I want to go watch your documentary to see what your journey was like.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. And that led to some like very hyper synchronistic type events that I didn't know how to interpret or handle.
Yep.
And things kind of just got wild. I kind of just didn't come down from the trip space. It just like kind of started bleeding into everyday life. And that's when things got confusing.
Wow. And so you ended up in a psych ward.
Yeah.
And that was all. So obviously that wasn't a part of your documentary plan, right?
No, I mean, it was an interesting twist. And if I was going to go to a psych ward because of psychedelics at any point in my life, I mean, it might as well have been while we were recording a documentary about psychedelics, because it added an interesting element. And if that wouldn't have happened, it would have been like a probably over the top evangelical exploration of psychedelics. And because that happened, it kind of had this built-in disclaimer.
Yeah. Showing people like, hey, like, yes, these are powerful and can be high. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time someone said I did mushrooms and it completely changed my life in the best way ever, shifted my reality to sort of like, I think Tool had a song, Prying Open My Third Eye, talking about it. It like has that effect. And then you come back and you bring sort of your experience with you in a way that now you're seeing the world through an expanded perspective. Wow, highly beneficial. Now you take that substance all day, every day, or 3 times a day, or 3 times a week, or whatever. It could perhaps cause a disconnect from your 3D reality, which is sort of what I would say you ultimately came here to experience as a soul. And it's like ultimately, I think because of the way, it's like, okay, naturally, how are we wired to perceive this reality is probably the default that is in the highest and best. And if we're constantly altering that, I could see how, it could lead to a psych ward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, higher and best don't mean much of anything to me. And I do think that our perceptions are incredibly fickle and biased in a number of ways. One of my favorite topics on my podcast is cognitive biases and the very many ways in which we evolved to bias information, and the way that our brains bias the information that they send to our kind of conscious awareness more for the strategy of replicating genes than for our own individual best interest or for some clear representation of reality. And I actually think that psychedelics can be a tool to understanding the brain and to understand objective reality as well. But you definitely need both, and they're definitely two very different experiences. I mean,
Right.
I think sometimes psychedelics are just a window to let us know that to remind us that we're actually tripping all of the time.
Right.
And life is a trip.
It's like a DMT experience. Some people say like this is a full-blown all the time DMT trip.
Yeah. I mean, this is just because, we're pretty complacent with it and everything. But, if you look at any baby trying to interpret this new existence they find themselves in, they're
tripping balls.
Yeah, they are definitely tripping balls. They're on an emotional roller coaster ride, and it's a weird, confusing experience. We just eventually get used to how weird it is, and it becomes our new normal. But yeah, you probably don't want the psychedelic experience to become your new normal.
Right.
I think that's where things go a little haywire. And there's these great LSD MRIs are coming out, like, look at the brain on LSD, and it's like beautifully lit up and almost looks like a superpower. Like, ooh, look at all these new connections. But
right.
the brain and conscious experience and behavior, it's not just the number of connections, it's what connections are happening and what connections are being used that are appropriate to the context and the environment that you're trying to navigate.
Sure.
And connections just for connection's sake can make things really confusing. And there's actually a lot of early development is a lot of there's a lot of synaptic pruning, which is actually cutting off connections between different connections in the mind to categorize things to help us make better sense of life. And so you do psychedelics and you're like, oh, it's all connected and that's reality. It's like, well, you have more connections in your brain right now, and you're kind of projecting that inner experience on the external world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's connected in the way that you think that it is. And there is a reason why we want to differentiate sounds from visual information, from smells,
Right.
These are all like really useful tools, and babies don't experience this as much. It's more just a big blob of indecipherable information for a long time. And so part of the psychedelic experience is it kicks in a lot of that like childlike kind of brain activity and creativity and neuroplasticity, and these are all wonderful things to a point.
Yep.
But you don't want just an endless amount of neuroplasticity. You don't want to be having to relearn how to take every step in life.
Too much ketamine will do that to you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that experience last night. I was laid out
Am I
on
wearing
the
moon
floor.
boots or what?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's life's about balance, and I think these are really useful experiences, but at the same time, like everything, moderation is sort of the key.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. It's a great point, and I think it's really powerful that that's sort of portrayed in your documentary as well, because I know people that have really you have a sort of a taste for this psychedelic landscape. And it's like it's such a draw, right? It's like this magical place where certainly, I mean, some of the most powerful experiences I've had have been at transformational festivals playing with psychedelics, and it just opens up this you get in this container with thousands of people who are all in this elevated state, sometimes using psychedelics, sometimes not, but everyone's heart blasted open and very maybe open-minded spiritually speaking, and so it creates this field of resonance, I believe, where there can be these like very magical sort of synchronicities and serendipitous sort of things that unfold, and then it's like then that becomes this big draw. Meanwhile, I'll have like a friend who here in the Mystic Manor who helps to run the retreat. She's like no substance of any kind. She came back yesterday from 3 hours of ecstatic dancing and like, oh my gosh, I'm so naturally high. Or let's do this breath work, holotropic breath work together. Wow, you're naturally super high. So I think there's something really powerful to be said, okay, using these tools, getting what you can from them, keeping it in moderation to some degree, and realizing that these are actually all states that can be achieved, without anything.
Yeah. I mean, I would have a hard time inhibiting my ability to walk through meditation alone, but
right.
maybe like that's what when you reach enlightenment, you just start like crawling around on the floor and laughing.
Maybe that's the pinnacle of it all. Like, yes, I don't have to spend another dime on psychedelics.
I actually don't even believe in such a thing as enlightenment. I believe that things are enlightening and life can continue to be enlightening, and there is no I don't think that there's
attainment.
No, there's no finish line in life. I think that there's reasons why it kind of subjectively feels like that way, that you're going to like reach this goal and then you're going to be set forever. And that's just because it makes you a little more driven to reach that goal. But,
I agree with you.
Then you can have believe me, you can have your dreams come true and the day after still be like, oh, well, now what the fuck am I going to do?
Right. Yeah, I am 111% with you on that. It's like, I believe you sort of, as fractals of source consciousness, that it is, God, higher self, the universe, whatever you want to call it. You are fractal, you're one with it, and it is infinite in all directions. So anytime you sort of attain a new plateau, or okay, I made it to the next, I beat the last boss and I'm to the next level of the video game. It's like a whole new level opens up before you, a new plateau, a new landscape, and it continues onward. And that's my own belief and perception of what our journey through eternity is like. And I hope I'm right, because that then means it always remains interesting and gives us more to explore. And
until you get to that kill screen.
Yeah. Until you get to the reset, and then you go back. Okay, I'm doing it all over again. Like, which is pretty. Can maybe be a little bit of a daunting, intimidating thought, but I think there may be some of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the experience of it feeling like an infinite loop that we need to keep on doing over and over again, but. How my perspective differs is that I would say that these are a lot of internal processes that we are trying to these are our inner worlds that are more vast and complicated and than we could ever imagine. This one conscious experience that we have is one of thousands of levels of perception that we aren't privy to, that are driving all of our decisions and storing our memories and everything else. And psychedelics are a tool to understand this. And I think that we use a lot of our external realities to articulate what our internal world feels like. And so we use metaphors like, now you're using a video game metaphor. Well, video games haven't been around for that long, so people are just starting to make a little more of these metaphors. Before that, it was like this reincarnation thing that all of this keeps on happening again and again. And really, this is like, there are kind of natural cyclical cycles to life, seasons, generations, that sort of thing. And so to me, I would say life doesn't repeat itself. It kind of remixes itself. And it is like kind of cyclical in nature, but it isn't the exact same thing happening again and again. But it's, as we try to articulate, like when you have an idea, like a light bulb goes off in your head. Well, how did you articulate what an idea was before the light bulb? Well, there was agriculture before that, so you had like the seed of an idea, or when electricity was invented, you had the spark of an idea, and now computers come along, and we're getting these massive downloads and having to like defrag them, and so and these are just new. It's because our external environment and technology and culture and civilization keeps on shifting, and we're kind of grasping for these physical metaphors to interpret our inner experiences. And to me, this is a lot of what the psychedelic experience is like. And it's certainly like your perception of things is the popular perception and what it subjectively feels like in the psychedelic experience. And I've definitely had those experiences a number of times, and I'm open to them. And honestly, I'm not super open-minded when it comes to them. Part of the reason why I went to the psych ward is because I started having more and more experiences like that, and it didn't really jive well with my scientific understanding of things. Like most people experience like a sense of connection with God, or a sense that there is no death, and there's like an afterlife, or these synchronistic events. And it's like this wonderful little like, oh, it's life's a journey. And I guess it's just like, we're all on this path, and that synchronicity is a sign that I'm on the right path. And to me, those experiences are unsettling and creepy as fuck, and
really
make me feel as if I'm like being manipulated, or this is all like some joke on me, or some simulation that I'm stuck in. And Truman Show situation. I had a lot of Truman Show stuff, especially during my I have Truman Show stuff anyway, but then in shooting the documentary, I would be on ketamine, be having a Truman Show-ish experience, and then get out, open my eyes, and there would be cameras around me. And it was like a little on the nose universe. And so, that stuff became kind of unsettling. So I'm actually very like envious of people that have, for me, and like a sense of God or whatever is like comforting for people, or like and for me, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that thing is, or what it's going to do to me, or the people that I know, or this existence. And the idea with the afterlife, like, oh no, there's more life after this. This just keeps on going forever. And I'm like, well, can I tap out? Because I don't want to live it, infinitely. I don't want to see every single I don't want to be every person and be every living thing and be every piece of substance and experience everything from every possible vantage point. It sounds exhausting
Daunting.
and boring and troubling, and there's no escape. And then what do I got to do to get out of this? Do I jump off a building? And then nope, because then I realize my consciousness has also been just like sitting in the sidewalk the whole time, waiting for me to smash my own.
I've got to be the wife. I've got to be the wife of the guy that jumped off the building now and experience it from that vantage point. Like, oh no. So I feel that. I get that, man. That's like valid. That's a valid. It is a bit daunting. I have a friend, and she, this highly creative, talented, young woman, super gifted, and she is. But you're around her, and her energy feels like a lot of times like she's tired. And she told me one time, she goes, I'm tired because I feel like I'm just ready for something to remain the same. She's like, she has experiences where she has lucid dreams at night that are as real or more real than this every night. So for her, she's like, Brandon, I'll go to sleep at night and then I'll go and be in another lifetime, in another civilization, in another character. I'll live 15, 20 years of that person. Sometimes I'll live this long period. I could tell you detail after detail after detail after detail of their life. She's telling me this one story where as that person, she committed suicide and then wakes up after 20 years in that body and she's back and it's the next morning here. And going through that, like all the time, and she's just like, I just want something to remain the same, kind of, right? And it's like, can you imagine going to bed tonight and then you go live the equivalent of a whole nother lifetime, and then you wake up and it's just one more day in Shane's life, and then you do it again the next life? Like, it's like, what? And she that's what she's claiming her experience is. And I'm just like, holy smokes, man. I could, that is a little troubling and intimidating from one perspective. And, from another, I do think the underlying reason for it all personally is love. And that source, whatever it is, this thing out there doing it, as you said, is an extension of the same consciousness that animates my form and your form and every form. And there is havens of relief, ecstasy, bliss, etc. throughout the eternal dance, and that you have the ability to navigate to those for extended periods of time, which then make the rest of it all worth it. That's my own perspective on it.
Yeah, from my perspective, love is an evolved emotion meant to motivate various behaviors that have adaptive value, just like every other emotion. Like fear is an emotion to keep you out of danger. Pain, that's a very adaptive. Pain is this adaptive feeling so that your hand doesn't melt off when you accidentally put it on a stove burner. And I do think that we are kind of hopeless wish thinkers in that love is an evolved emotion meant to be kind of an emotional contract for keeping connections. And from more of a scientific perspective, and I do think that connections and networks and cooperation are really valuable, and they are some of the best parts of life. But it's not all cooperation out there, and life gets real. And you definitely don't want to cooperate with like AIDS and fall in love with like cancer. There are things that you definitely want to actively be avoiding, going to war with, killing, and that's all part of this this brutal, and sometimes wonderful and sometimes boring, and the whole emotional palette of existence. But it does seem like we tend to attach to those like really, really positive, because it is, a psychedelic experience, for example, is often the whole emotional palette being emphasized, but people come out of it and they kind of have disregarded any of the negative things, or that was like room for something
Trauma
that they
relief.
they built off of or whatever. But it's all like everyone comes out and is like, oh, it's just universal love, whereas like no one ever comes out of the psychedelic experience and is like, oh, I get it now. It's just like
It's
all
all
about the
pain.
universal paranoia and
Right.
like I gotta be more awkward in social situations is what I just learned from God, and that's
Right.
all very much part of the psychedelic experience. It's all very much part of
Totally.
life. And it is, I think that there is a lot of social pressure on us to be giving one another pep talks and to be
Sure.
emphasizing all of the positives all the time. And I mean, one of my favorite things about psychedelics is getting into the darkness and
Yeah.
working through that and figuring out what is valid. I mean, that's I did a meditation series on patience recently, and it definitely made the important point of like, being a patient person doesn't mean just taking shit from people all the time in every situation and letting people run over you. Sometimes you still have to even a patient person overall has to pick and choose some battles and stick up for themselves and let their perspective be heard. And so, it's to me, if anything, I'd say it's a little more about balance and figuring out those like sweet spots between between the appropriate time to act and not act on various competing interests in your mind, and figuring out the best, the good and the bad for you. But you're going to, hopefully as you get better at existing, you get better at picking your poison and picking your pain. And because I think that you can't have the good experiences without it, but your pain and your torture can be like running marathons or whatever, are how you experience torture, rather than something a little more adaptive than
Right.
The debilitating and couch surfing leading to depression,
Unnecessary
leading to more
amount.
couch
Yeah.
surfing.
Yeah, for me, it's like the love, ecstasy, bliss, the love bubble that everyone is, sort of longing for, seeking, and has glimpses of, or however, hopefully they have glimpses of for ever extending periods of time. But all of the pain and negativity and trouble and torture, as you put it, is a tool. Like, if source, God, higher self, whatever, is love, and that's all that it is, it's one, and it's everything, and it's love, that's the equivalent of being nothing, right? There is no other, there is no contrast. So all of those things are actually, yes, they're challenging and maybe difficult. However, I personally believe they're happening as a tool for the underlying experience to have love to actually have some sort of contrast, context, and meaning. And so, for my optimistic perspective, it is not, existence certainly isn't for the faint of heart, but it's ultimately this beautiful dance, as to why it is unfolding. And I think if we can continue to focus on that piece of it, it makes those, very challenging points more bearable and and worth it.
Yeah, it's certainly a better perspective than a lot of people out there that have like a war and hate and defense and fear mindset. But there's balance within everything, and within the psychedelic community. Sometimes I see a fair amount of wish thinking out there. And I also see a lot of like, actually people, like a lot of pettiness too, and
Yep.
within psychedelic circles of everyone trying to like inch ahead in this and figure out this space of like, how do I make money doing this and helping people, and do I and then there's like these illegitimate shamans out there, and this and that shaman or retreat is dangerous, and that's all stuff that we need to be aware of. But then also there's times when it's just like, yeah, this person's a fraud and they don't know. You got to listen to my perspective instead. And it's the same like petty nonsense that like that comics do all of the time. That reminded me of my early comedy upbringing of like, I used to be that way in comedy. I used to be like the joke police and like, this person did a premise that I heard someone else do something similar once, and they're stealing it, and like, and I get like so worked up and like call people out and all that, and not realizing that there's just like, oh yeah, people just like come up with the same ideas sometimes, independent of one another, and there's
hundreds
nothing
monkey
like malicious behind it. And I see some of that in the psychedelic communities as well. But then I also just see like, you know, there's a lot of as someone who I'm a part of the psychedelic communities. I really believe in psychedelics. I believe in they're my favorite people to be around. And also sometimes there's just like a lot of unwarranted optimism that ends up leading to unactualized, unrealistic goals being set. A lot of like very big, well-meaning ideas without any of the discipline to actually make them happen.
Yeah, it's like you got to come down off of the mushrooms to execute that idea.
Yeah,
that huge life-changing idea, bro.
Yeah, it's like it's all about love. Well, you know what? I don't love doing taxes, but still got to do that shit to like pull it off. Still got to email people to make these shows happen and that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of balance. I'm happy that we are, you know, we're very, I feel bad for people that haven't gotten a chance to do psychedelics and open up some of these different doors of perceptions to take a peek through, because I think so many of them are really valid, and some of them are can lead you astray as well and be misinterpreted and everything else. But the ability to so quickly take on so many different perceptions and such jarring and different perceptions and lenses through which to look at reality is really what the psychedelic experience is all about. And most people go their whole lives, like, you know, say going to church each week out of a sense of obligation or a sincere search for meaning, and they're going to the same book club week after week and hearing the same topics brought up, and in the hopes of attaining 1/100th the sense of the feeling that I got just snorting some ketamine last night and laying on the floor.
Right. My friend who's led like 25 years of ayahuasca journeys is like, yeah, you can go to, 25 years of therapy perhaps, or take ayahuasca one night and achieve, perhaps the same or more, but that being said, it's not for the faint of heart. And like you said, there can be some in that journey, there can be ecstasy, bliss, realizations that are life shattering and powerful. And also, you may get blasted into the 1700s in a past life where you were on the battlefield and wounded and like all these crazy, it brings the curtains down for sure. And you never know. Each person is different, exactly what you're going to get. So it's definitely, psychonaut is someone who is willing to explore the edges of physical reality, I believe. And for me, it's been certainly a overall, obviously, this show's called Positive Head. My new show's called Optimistic. Like
you're the yin to my yang.
Yeah, and you know what I would say to that, Shane, is what I always say, we're all exploring here trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And I always say, if you look at applying the perspectives and the results that they get, the results are what speak the loudest. We can all talk about theories and ideas, but for me, by applying the perspectives that I've applied, it has led to a really great, wonderful human experience. And so for me, the results are the results speak loudest. And so, it
well, let me tell you, as someone who resides in the darkness and doesn't believe in myself or humanity and finds existence really quite troubling, I've also done pretty well for myself and had a lot of great times.
But what's your yeah? Well, there you go. Then why aren't you focusing on that more? Is I would say, right?
I try to tell people this is all pointless. They just won't listen to me.
Nothing matters and everything counts.
I need people to know that nothing matters. It matters to me that everyone. What drives me in life that is letting people know that there is no point in being driven. No, I mean, I do think much of this existence is ultimately, in terms of our individual existence, I think much of our motivators is just having, you asked me the elevator pitch for our passion, and I don't believe that there's a passion in and of itself that is like the right passion and an objective truth, but I do feel like you need to keep moving in life. You need to keep finding things that do drive you. I think that you are often arbitrarily being or just being driven in arbitrary kind of directions that don't, like, from an objective point of view, mean a whole hell of a lot of anything, but hopefully it motivates you to keep going and motivates you to, I mean, I think that there's a lot of, we are in the psychedelic community pretty hard on the ego, whatever the ego even is. But, I think that there are intrinsic egocentric motivations to helping others, to helping
I call it the good kind of selfish,
the environment. and I think that, I think a lot of people actually are missing the point on how many of these lessons and being aware of things like the threat of a nuclear apocalypse or global warming and being a little more mindful and doing little things to take action don't necessarily, it's great if it makes you feel good and makes others feel good and everything, but it also can just be plain and simple in your own interest to think about things in these ways and be more mindful of these kind of bigger impacts on our lives, because I think that we can make for ourselves and the life around us better. But it's all, again, none of this is objective. Global warming, sure, there's going to be like a desertification and everything, and most like in a worst case scenario, a lot of life on this planet will go extinct, and this is great news for a lot of cactus out there. There's everything is very subjective and contextual, and so we really need to think hard about what that means for us, and also giving into allowing for this symbiotic relationship that we have with the environment. I think trees are pretty great and pretty cool and everything, but more importantly, love breathing that oxygen that they provide for us. And so it's they're more than just like a pretty thing to look at. This is our lives depend on this. And so there's just a zillion different ways to look at all of these states, and I can be a little bit of a contrarian, and I really love bringing in alternative ways to look at things. And if I'm sitting around my my conservative rural Wisconsin family this Thanksgiving, I might be bringing up points that you're bringing up right now, just because it's the exact opposite of their point of view. And that's the beauty of a lot of these experiences, if you ask me, is just seeing so many different lenses, and I do think that can lead to a more objective truth overall.
Yeah, well said. I agree. So we touched on your horrifying next level synchronicities. I'd love to hear one of your stories if you got something good to share.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily have time to get into a huge synchronicity story, but I can tell you what, for people that watch Psychonautics, the comic exploration of psychedelics, I can tell you kind of like a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff that happened. Basically, and we touch on this a little bit in the documentary, but I went to go do ayahuasca to get ready for doing ayahuasca on camera, because the two times I had done ayahuasca in my life before that were really mild by experience. I had a lot of DMT experience, and so I kind of wrote that off as like, well, maybe I'm just like used to these worlds, and it's not as intense for me. And so, like, what's a proper amount so that I can have like a real full-on experience on camera?
Yep.
And so, I had the full like 2-cup journey this time, and had like a really lovely experience, but it made some predictions about, so it said that I was going to be some like communicator for kind of spreading the word to scientific communities to investigate DMT, and get more scientists involved in investigating DMT, and specifically DMT extended states. And because I had like interviewed a guy about trying to pipe dream of putting together a DMT extended state where you can do a DMT like 4-hour trip rather than 4-minute or whatever.
Right.
And and then I also got a message that this, like, I was supposed to do something with this one specific scientist about like a way of rebuilding the education system to make it more tribal, to make it more like the teachers, the adults or whatever, are learning just as much from the kids as the kids are learning from the adults, and more of like a conversational, less like much less of like a sitting behind a desk rigorous structure that we've implemented, and like authoritarian structure, and those were these two. I had other takeaways as well, but these two were the ones that led to synchronistic events. So the next day I went down off of this mountain where I didn't have cell reception, and I got 2 texts. One was from this guy, Daniel McQueen, who is putting together this DMT extended state, who I had interviewed for the documentary like some weeks prior or something like that. And he was like, hey, we're announcing on Gaia TV tomorrow, we're having this public event, and we have the team together and people flowing in from everywhere that are going to be on the DMT extended state team. We're wondering if we can announce you to be the very first participant in the DMT extended state study.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that's weird. And then the next message I got was from this scientist that I had thought of, and I had sent him a message on Twitter like 3 months before that and hadn't heard back. And then that day, I got a message from him, and he's he doesn't study the education system or anything. He's an evolutionary psychologist. I can't say his name because I don't want to blow up his spot, but he was like, "Hey, Shane, sorry I didn't write back earlier. Good to hear from you. By the way, here's this article that I wrote recently, and it's all about how we haven't adapted for the current education system that we have." And I was like, "That's crazy. I was just thinking about you during an ayahuasca trip last night." And he's like, "Weird. I thought of this idea while I was on mushrooms." And so those were two big synchronicities, and that led to other crazier stuff happening that I don't really have the time to share in this interview because it gets pretty deep. But I'm happy to do this again sometime. Maybe we can do a part 2.
Yeah, man. Or if you're coming through touring, of course you do your stand-up science tour. That maybe here in a minute you can tell everyone where they can.
Yeah, in L.A. I might be back in December.
Yeah. Maybe we can set something up. You come by the Mystic Manor, and perhaps even my new show Optimistic is like late night style, live studio audience, intimate setting, like 30 people, and visionary painters, like our mutual friend Jonathan Salter was last week.
That's
we
great.
just recorded. We haven't released the show yet, but we just put out the trailer yesterday, and about to start putting it out there to the world. So maybe, perhaps we can set something up in December and swing through the Mystic Manor. And certainly you and I would have to have it would be a requirement to make the time for a little bit of a journey.
No problem. Happy to.
Twist my arm. Why don't you?
All right. Awesome. Let's do it again then. And people can. So my show Stand Up Science is my kind of main thing that I'm touring with. The show is 2 scientists and me and a second comedian. And every show, so it's half comedy, half science. It's a little bit like a variety show. And and then with a Q&A at the end. So there's I do a comedy set, and then there's kind of like a TED Talk kind of thing. And then a comedy set, and then a TED Talk type of thing, and then a big discussion and Q&A at the end. And it's all different. I'm the only constant in the show in terms of people. It's all different guests each time. So it's all like local academics. So I'm in Cleveland tonight. It's people at the Cleveland State University that are going to be there, and so it's all local people doing. So you can hear kind of some of the research that's going on in your neck of the woods. And I travel everywhere with it. I'm in about 3 cities a week with it. And so if you don't see it on your schedule, join the email list, and I definitely will be to your area sometime probably within the next 6 months or so.
What is the best way to link up with that?
Shane Mauss, MAUSS.com is the best way to do it, because you can go to my contact, join my email list. You can check out my podcast, Here We Are, from there. You can get a link to my documentary, which is free on Amazon Prime. I have 3 different albums available, a special available. It was on Netflix years and years ago. I was one of the early Netflix specials. They have since revamped things, but the special's still available on other platforms. And I just have a bunch of stuff like that, Comedy Central sets, Conan stuff. And I also have links to a bunch of different big podcasts that I've been on, like Rogan and Mark Maron's WTF and Pete Holmes' You Made It Weird, and Duncan Trussell's Family Hour podcast that I have to my site, so you can hear me as a guest telling on a lot of those podcasts, especially the Pete Holmes and Duncan Trussell podcast, the more recent ones that I've done. I went pretty deep into some of the mental health issues that I had, and some of the interesting things that happened that spawned from that.
You remind me of Duncan. You remind me of Duncan a little bit.
Huh.
I'm sure. I bet you've heard that before.
We get along real well. He's great.
Yeah. He's awesome. He's definitely. I talked to him about having him on here a while back, and we were planning it, and then something happened. We had to reschedule, and that he had to cancel or something. And so yeah, that reminds me. I'd love to have him on. Awesome, Shane. You were such a trip. Pun intended. And I do have one last very cliche question for you. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Shane Mauss?
I think that all of meaning is subjective and contextual, and I actually don't think that there is a single meaning of life. Like when we were talking about enlightenment, I think that the perception that there is a meaning to life is an arbitrary goal that seems like a finish line, but is not, and it's just to keep moving in arbitrary directions. Boom, 30 seconds.
I knew you were going to say that. Oh, Shane, you're awesome, man. I've had such a great time here, and yeah, let's definitely connect about when you're in LA, and we can have some fun in 3D. In person here on Optimistic, and otherwise, all of you out there listening, thank you for tuning in. As always, love you so much. Journey well, my friends. And if you're feeling the call to come for a week retreat style Mystic Manor immersion, remember to go now and book your time to speak with me directly about stepping into the optimistic vortex at calendly.com/talk with Brandon while there are still spots left. Otherwise, I look forward to co-creating magic with you at the Mystic Manor.